from this inward feeling place, let's encounter the actual sutra that we're going to be working with. And you can repeat it out loud. We're going to say this sutra 3 times and let the vibration affect you just like a mantra, feeling the source of this ancient teaching. Mohad Jayad Ananta Bhogat Sahaja Vidya Jaya. Moha Jayad Ananta Bhogat Sahaja Vidya Jaya. One more time. Moha Jayad Ananta Bhogat Sahaja Vidya Jaya. After conquering the field of illusion, Maya, by destroying its many impressions, one attains the victory of the pure knowledge of consciousness. Yep, so keep coming back to feeling, encountering the text, then encountering feeling. And this is like the process of using philosophy for growth.
And feel free to read it to yourself again.
All right. And let's move into the some of the text of the sutra, which I've taken here. I've got a couple of excerpts that we're going to like work on together, and I've broken them apart in order for us to really start to feel the subtleties of it. So for reading, I'm going to pick someone to read.
Oh, sure. Oh, look, we have a volunteer. Thank
we have
you,
a volunteer.
Anandama. First time ever.
Yeah.
This is a big day.
Because
she was feeling inside. She just knew she wanted to read. So, please read.
What is illusion? Moha. It's a little, hang on. What is illusion? Moha. Illusion is this completely differentiated universe filled with impressions and experiences. When this illusion is conquered, is that Jayat, which means overcome, Abhibhavat, then victory is achieved. Through this pure knowledge, Vidya is realized, where eternal aspects are revealed and supreme God consciousness is obtained by Swami Lakshmanju.
All right, everyone, take 45 seconds or so to read this again on your own. I'd like to take a moment to just look at this in 3 sections. So you have a chance to reread it with me here. The first section, illusion is this completely differentiated universe filled with impressions and experience. So we have a sense of like, okay, what is illusion? It is this differentiated universe, and what does that mean? Well, it's everything you sort of see, hear, feel, think, impressions and experiences you have throughout the day. When we conquer this illusion, which means overcome, then victory is achieved. When this illusion is conquered, when it is overcome, or as our teachers usually say, transcended, maybe, then victory is achieved. Okay, so we're going to try and overcome illusion. And then the victory is described as this. Through this victory, pure knowledge is realized, where eternal aspects are revealed and supreme God consciousness is obtained. Through this victory of conquering illusion, pure knowledge is realized. What is pure knowledge? Well, that's when eternal aspects of reality are revealed, and supreme God consciousness, it's a big term, don't always encounter that, is obtained. So here's the whole quote up there again and broken into those three parts. So to start working with this and feeling with it, I think we have to begin with this concept of illusion and ask ourselves, where do you find illusion in your life and practice? Like, how would you define illusion? Is it like literally like a mirage in the desert? Like, I haven't been in the desert recently, but I feel like I know what they might mean by illusion. But I mean, so like encounter it. Like, I want you to take a 30 seconds, and I'm trying to do a mandatory 30 seconds so that people who aren't like, necessarily like quick on the draw for commenting have time to formulate that. But you want to add before we do?
Should I give an example?
Sure. Well,
do you feel like you need an example, or are you good? You're good. Okay.
So take 30 seconds and feel with illusion. Illusion? It's not Halloween anymore. So what is illusion? And the pen and paper can be a fun place to jot down what you're sort of encountering.
If you don't have a pen and paper, you can take notes on your computer.
Just another breath or two. And then let's take a moment to sort of walk this path together a little bit. Oh, and did you want to start with an example, or? No, we're good. So does anyone feel like they sort of felt like a connection to this concept of illusion, like where they might want to kick us off a little bit? Rita, great. So yeah, just unmute and just describe how you answered that.
I just answered it as illusion can be the nonsense of our minds, what our minds come up with, and what our minds try to tell us. And half the time, it's not real. It's because we need to pull back down into our heart to feel that, and not what's going on up in the clouds here.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's keep going with this and just sort of walk it through the steps of the sutra. So you've identified like your mind can create thoughts, like as Patanjali says, which when pursued have no basis in reality. Your mind can create literally illusions, thoughts that you could or could not pursue. And so Rita, when you find yourself, like, do you feel like you can identify when that is happening? Like you have experiences where you're like, this is an illusion. You do? Cool. And so how do you conquer it? Because he uses the word conquer. Maybe you don't relate to that term, but like talk me through how you relate to conquering that illusion.
When the thoughts come in, and I'll ask myself, is this really real? Where did this come from? Just depending on the circumstance. I take my deep breath into my heart and I tap into that, and I ask the same question from what I was asking the mind, and I ask the heart, and then my heart always tells me
Mm-hmm.
that we need to take this path. Don't go that way. Or
Yeah, so it becomes like it's almost like you can see some kind of, there's a quality to that experience of that illusion that you've learned to like recognize, and that you've developed a pathway to your heart in your practice
yeah,
that
the
you're able to
guide.
like utilize. Cool.
Yes, like there's a guide there.
Mm-hmm.
Something is guiding me, or it's not. Well, it's the energy
Mm-hmm.
guiding to know, where I can pull myself out of that and know, okay, we don't need to go back into that illusion of thoughts. We need
Yeah.
to tap into what I'm really feeling here. Yeah.
Just the other day, someone here, we were talking about like when you're really caught in illusion, like how can you even find your practice? You know, and I think that's something that a lot of us have probably encountered. So, does anyone else want to sort of comment on that? Yeah, finding that practice within the illusion. Yeah, Alice.
Hi, yes, I have a similar experience to Rita. I can notice this happening in my meditation, if not only thoughts but emotions too. And I just ask for surrender. I just say I deeply wish to surrender and realize that I'm not your mind. I'm not my
Mm.
thoughts. I really try to connect with my inner self and see this as human experiences. But that's not my. I'm a spiritual being having human experiences. I just have to surrender to them, and that's the way I really connect with my inner self.
Alice, thanks. I think what you bring up is a really important part, and something that I think we look at. Swami Rujananda often tells us, so lineage teacher Swami Rujananda, Babaji's teacher, that surrender must be complete. You can't just surrender this and not that, or surrender a part of something. And I think when you said, like, you really just ask to surrender, and that's something that Swami Rujananda always talks about. He always says, like, ask deeply from this place. What I feel like that's showing us is like when you're caught in illusion, sometimes all you know is that you're in something. You're in something, but you don't necessarily know how to solve it, and you don't necessarily know how to get out of it. But like the one thing you do know is you're caught in something, and then you can ask, like to let go of like everything in that moment in order to find your way out. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, as Satyam was talking, it made me realize like I don't necessarily experience it like, oh, I am caught in illusion. It's more like I'm
Right.
suffering,
There's
right? Like I
suffering. Yeah,
feel
that's a good way to put it.
suffering, and it's sort of it's really uncomfortable, and that's sort of like the signal, you know. So at least for me, it's not like this like majestic thing of like, oh, I am in the sea of illusion, but rather like I feel terrible, and
Mm.
then my inner voice is almost like, oh, okay, now I have to like walk the path as Rita expressed, you know, to like get space from this suffering.
Great point.
One technical thing,
Yeah.
are we spotlit so that the other
Oh,
speakers aren't visible? Are you getting to see other people when they talk?
I have us on
Yes.
Spotlight,
Okay,
but
great.
people can choose.
Awesome.
So in case you're wondering, in the I think top right corner of your screen, there's an option to see speaker view or gallery view. And when we're having like this bigger discussion, it can be really awesome to see the gallery view because it's just so, it feels like you're in a room with a bunch of friends. Okay, we have right here from Konalani. So just give me one sec. I'm going to spotlight her so you can see her, and you can talk whenever you're ready.
I really liked everything that everybody said, and it was kind of the progression that I had in my own head when I was thinking about what illusion was for me. And oftentimes for me, it shows up as loneliness. And my comment is that sometimes I can't, like, I can acknowledge that that loneliness is not real, but it doesn't happen often in the moment that I'm able to transcend. Often it requires just an acknowledgement, and that's like as far as it can go. And then it is just a little bit of faith, maybe is the right word, like just a knowledge that I'll remember later. And that even so, I was just noting that the progression of the sutra is like acknowledgement and then like victory. And my comment is that sometimes those things are not like that pathway is not particularly linear all the time for me.
Absolutely.
But it
And
still comes.
And thank you so much for sharing. And I think it's so cool to be able to recognize these more abstract concepts in really practical ways. Like that's literally how you experience it. That's huge. And the next part of the sutra is going to walk us through this process more intricately, because it really isn't just like see illusion, conquer it. We came, we saw, it's a little bit more complicated. Not complicated, but it's a little bit more arduous. But this is like the zoomed out, like, hey, here's what we're doing in the sutra. So do you guys want to look at another quote? You ready? Okay, I don't want to rush anyone if they were like, oh, I really wanted to say something. All right, here we go.
Anandama really wants to say something.
I do want to say something. This week in my meditation practice, well, when I sit down and I'm doing a lot of Ganesh, and I'm always like, okay, Ganesh is inside me. I'm Ganesh. I'm surrendering. I'm doing all the things that Rita and Alice were talking about. And I was trying to go really deep, and I'm looking at my little statue of Ganesh and working with that differentiated and undifferentiated. It came to me that I was looking at a mirror, that all of a sudden Ganesha was the mirror, and I was looking at myself in the mirror, and it completely changed my practice. And I think it ties into this undifferentiated view, and I have to look at the words, and that illusion. It felt like a layer of illusion dissolved for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Anandama. That's such a powerful experience, and it's sort of like what Mandira was just sharing, that I feel like we all receive that, and we're like, oh, I want to look in the Ganesh mirror. And it might not happen, instantaneously for each one of us, but like you've sort of planted the seed of like a way that we can break down differentiation and see the self, see this consciousness in ourselves and all things around us. So thank you for planting that seed for each of us.
Hmm. All right, and before we go on to our next quote, we're going to just take a moment to reconnect with feeling. All right, so just start. This one's called the wobble, and it's the super abridged version of what Abhaya taught you. And this one, you actually just imagine you're in a pool of water, and let's say there's a little current to it. And so it sort of pushes you slightly random directions. And there's a buoyancy in water, so you feel lightness to your movement. And try to see if that movement can ripple up from the base of the spine, mid-spine, shoulders, neck, and head, so that you feel this connectivity through your torso. And a lightness, a floating almost. And then let yourself really slowly float to center as if the water's current just slowly subsided. There's those residual ripples that keep moving you little by little, but you really gradually float to stillness. And then from there, you can easily reconnect with your breath. Sometimes you can smooth the breath out just a little and it helps you find that path. And from this space of awareness, we can encounter our next quote.
Who feels like they
Yeah, who
want to
feels like
read?
reading it?
Tara, well, are you open to reading, even if you don't feel like it?
I'll make it
Thanks.
as big as I can here.
Bondage is just differentiated knowledge. It is experiencing the objects of the world as separate from God consciousness. Here, you think that God consciousness is pure and consciousness in worldly life is impure. You must quiet experiencing these kinds of bondage, pashas, and focus your mind toward pure God consciousness. When you abandon this experience of bondage and direct your mind toward God consciousness, experiencing only yourself, that is known as the pervasion of God consciousness. The pervasion of... I've lost the self. Atmavya Pati.
Excellent. And we'll take a minute for everyone to read through it on their own, and thank you so much for reading that. And we'll reread through this in 3 sections like we did before. First, we see that bondage is just differentiated knowledge. That's a big one. It is experiencing the objects of the world as separate from God consciousness. Here you think that God consciousness is pure and consciousness in worldly life is impure. That's describing this differentiated knowledge that creates bondage and suffering. So that's part 1. We're told we must quit experiencing these kinds of bondage, pashas, and focus your mind towards pure God consciousness. Okay? So we're told we must quit this type of reacting. And then finally we're told when you abandon this experience of bondage, again, it's a sense of letting it go. When you let it go and direct your mind toward God consciousness, experiencing only yourself, that's something we'll talk about, that is known as the pervasion of God consciousness. When God consciousness pervades your life, or when consciousness pervades your life, right? This is also called the pervasion of the self, when the self pervades your life. I wanted to summarize this quote with Swami Rujananda's quote about difference builds walls and lack of difference breaks down walls. You know, I thought he had a really synthesized way of saying this. Differentiation, seeing difference, creates walls in suffering. When you break down those walls, that's called a lack of difference. Yeah.
And I think Mandira's example of like feeling lonely is like a really cool expression of this quote, because it's sort of like that feeling of separateness, right? That is what loneliness
Separateness, yeah.
can be like. And then she said she has to pause, and she realizes something's going on there. And then later there's this realization, right, where it shifts and she no longer feels separate. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Mandira. We're in the same room here. But then eventually, by redirecting her attention, her feeling shifts, and it may be that recognition of the big S self, that she's complete. Does that sort of feel accurate for you? She's nodding, so.
You can, okay.
She said it does, like loneliness does feel like a wall, and then the wall disappears. So sort of that acknowledgement that the experience changes, depending on how we work with it.
Yeah. So I know it's a big quote. Thanks for already unpacking that through an example. And just to unpack it together and to work with it, to feel with it. In this section, we're basically told differentiated knowledge leads to bondage, which is another word for suffering. But we have to relate to this, feel this. What is differentiated knowledge? Like we throw that term around, but take a breath or two for a moment and differentiated knowledge. One way we can encounter this is if you just sort of reflect for a moment, and I think this is what Abaya just unpacked very well for us. Maybe what part of your day or what part of your experience do you encounter this feeling of difference? Difference. When does that come up? Just another breath. And now take a moment to feel, is that feeling of difference that you have in whatever situation it might be, is it separate from the external environment that caused it? And that's, I think, something really worth feeling. Because that opens the door to this thing that you're feeling being something that you can let go of. It's not, that feeling might have been caused by an external situation, but the thing you're experiencing is actually coming from inside. That's the for me was the big shift that was presented in this. So let's take a moment. I don't want to rush anyone. Let's take just at least 30 seconds right now. If you want to just do a little bit of writing or a little bit of reflecting on like identifying that situation and then identifying the feeling being different, just sort of encountering that.
Yeah, and it can be helpful to be specific with yourself,
Yeah.
to really try to think of a specific example, because when you think of that, you'll really feel
Mhm.
rather than like generalizing, like, oh, I feel separate when I'm tired or whatever.
Cool.
Hi, Capri. Thanks for joining us. Good to see you. Is your spiritual name Darshana? Is that? It's a secret.
No,
Okay.
my spiritual name is Vina.
Ah,
Vina.
that's why I said Capri. I was like, I don't know her spiritual name. And then, hi, Vina. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, look, there's
There's Rita.
Harry.
Just another moment, and then we'll check in with everybody. Question? Does anyone feel inspired sort of to kick off this last portion of class for us? Oh, Danielle, double hand raise is 100% awesome. Go for it.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm really excited.
Right on.
So, funny enough to me, you talked about illusion before, and I feel like it's connected to this in a way because I was thinking about sometimes I attach illusion with perception. And so sometimes I think we can all be trapped or in bondage with our perception. And so I feel like your perception can be different from someone else's. And a specific example, without going too deep, is a friend of mine had a perception about something that I had done 2 years ago. Of course I didn't remember, but her perception was different from my perception. And so the result of hearing her perception, unfortunately created walls. And so now, we have to work on breaking those walls down, because the best way we can do that is to understand each other. And I think with that, it'll help us to keep the walls down and not build it back up.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. That was really awesome. Super helpful.
Yeah, that's such a great example, Danielle, of what I took from that, and I'm grateful for leaving out all the details of the situation, but that it was like the mind that created the barrier. It was like the situation was different in her mind than what you experienced, and so it was sort of like the limitation came from like our thoughts, and then the reconnecting physically and being able to communicate with each other was almost like letting go of those perceptions and coming back into like a unified experience,
And I think you really touched on, Danielle, something where I feel like this is where I encountered this the most in my life, is with basically just, the who's right, who's wrong, this hurt my feelings or I hurt their feelings. I feel like this happens a lot, like in everyday life. It's just something where you feel like, oh, if they would just say this, then I'd be fine. If they just said, or if we could just agree on this, then we'd get along. And something that I've really encountered is when I'm in that state of like, am I right, or are they right? Am I wrong? Are they wrong? I feel like that's when I hit this quit button. I just Alt Q, whatever it is on the keyboard these days. I just quit it. I drop it. I force quit the app. I just force quit it. And because I just know that when I'm caught in right and wrong, I'm caught in an illusion, and it is endless, and it's happening in me. It's not even happening outside. Like the conversation, let's say it happened a while ago, like you said, and then all the work after that is happening within the individual. And so I feel like what I'm so grateful for in our practice is just being given this other perspective on you can actually conquer this illusion within yourself without necessarily even exchanging a word with the individual. And some people might, we might automatically like knee-jerk react to that and be like, well, what do you mean? Like that, I don't want to be walked all over by someone. It's like, oh, well, don't use the most extreme example, but use like normal examples where we like struggle after something's been said, and it's all the struggle's happening in here. Nothing's happening in the room. The room's quiet, and yet I feel pretty bad. It's all happening in here. So I can like do something in here that profoundly affects my reality. And there's a lot of times there's nothing I can do out here. Person's not even here. Can't do anything. Sometimes we think we can change the situation here if they're in the room, and we all know how long that can go on, but so yeah, this is this quit button inside. And I apologize for for sort of taking the floor for a while, but Danielle, if you want to comment or anything, that's awesome. And if anyone else wants to jump on that, I see Venus hands up and then Mary Ann's hands up, but it's hard not to call him the really little girl.
Vina, go ahead. You can share.
Sometimes I can have stress about not getting enough sleep, and I know that's just like an illusion, like being tired or unable to do anything the next day because I'm too tired. That's an illusion. It's not there. It's in here. It's nothing in the room.
Wow.
Thanks for sharing,
Vina, you really made my day. I've never done philosophy with someone so young, and it just means so much to me. Thank you for your response. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Wow. That's like a lifelong dream right there, to do philosophy with someone under 12. All right, cool. Marianne, did you want to jump in? Oh, we're not hearing you either, so check that caret next to the mic and see if something weird is selected. Like, you muted. Okay, back. And test. Maybe just say something. Nope. If you want to, it's always easier to use your computer mic if there is one built in. That easier than like a headset sometimes. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. There you go.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, that was pretty amazing. So it's hard to come back after our little philosopher there. Really, more than anything, it's crazy because I was thinking exactly the same thing that Danielle came up with regarding perception. I mean, up to the language, I was right aligned with that whole stream of consciousness. With perception and illusion. And it's just interesting to me because I feel like the illusions and these perceptions are created by our ego more than anything. And the way conquering out of them is connecting to the self, the listener, and going at it from a place of unconditional love. Going back there in that direction. And it's just, I just really want to share because I was right there up to the language, was right on par with what her take on it was. That's it.
Nice.
And I'm done.
Thank you. No, it's really important to relate to this experience of quitting experiencing these kinds of bondage, of abandoning this experience of bondage. Like, what is the way you're doing it? How do you press the quit button in yourself? There is no external keyboard to do it. So
And
that's cool, the unconditional love.
There's something kind of comforting, about, even though it's an uncomfortable topic, right? Talking about differentiation and when do we feel separate or lonely or, get in fights with people, and then just hearing other people's examples, it just makes it so obvious that this is like a human experience that we can all relate to. And then as yogis, we have like these magical powers where we can choose to quit or choose unconditional love, and we don't have to continue to feel the suffering and the limitation.
Well, we're gonna stop there, of course, because we're out of time. But we're gonna do a little bit of just sit with the breath in a second. But I did want to say, for all of you who did write down a little something, it'd be really fun to see whatever you wrote. If you wanted to post it as a comment to this, to the blog post that will contain these slides and this video, and even like a downloadable audio transcript of this conversation. And then I think we're going to pick up right here next time because there's a little bit more. And so we could even reference some of what you had to say at the beginning of our next class. So I just wanted to put that out there, and you can find this stuff at our website. But let's wrap up together with a minute, literally, a minute of feeling your breath. How can you quit the mind for the next minute and connect with your breath? Namaste, everyone.